Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
And Tane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. Just me today. Tane can't join us. He's away doing some other cool things as he normally is, which is really awesome. And as always, I love to share what I've put into my basket of knowledge over the last few weeks. And the one thing that I have put into my basket of knowledge over the last few weeks is the power of reflection. So why the power of reflection is because I've just realized that a lot of us do some really cool things in our lives, but we don't ever take time to pause and reflect and celebrate those achievements. A lot of the times we look at those big things like a new job, a new career, a new car, those big milestones. But over the last few weeks, I was challenged by one of my coaches to think about the small wins and the reflections and celebrating those. And my challenge to our listeners out there is think about those small wins that you have had and how you've actually celebrated them. Or do you wait for the big wins to celebrate? And my challenge for you is to find that small win to celebrate. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It could just be a dance. It could be buying yourself a cupcake, whatever it is. But that's my challenge for you. But hey, we're not here to listen to me because if we do, I could be talking forever. As always, we scour the world and we scour the country to find people that we think are interesting. We know that everyone is interesting out there. Everyone's got a story to tell. And if I could, I'd make this my full-time job, but I'm not Joe Rogan yet, so we don't get paid for this yet. But one day, Joe Rogan will be coming for you. And today, I'm really excited and really honored and really privileged to introduce our guest. This is a person that is coming to my sphere just recently. Over the last few months, I have been training in the world of public speaking and professional speaking, and through that, I've met some really interesting people. And the person that I'm going to introduce this today is someone that popped into my sphere and has shared just a small bit of a life, and just by reading the small bit of life, I was like, wow, what an amazing person, what an amazing human. Not just what they've been through, but where they are right now. And it's really, like I said before, a privilege to have them on our podcast today. So without further ado, kia ora and welcome to Bastards of Knowledge, Roslyn.
Kia ora, Prajesh.
Yeah, thank you, Roslyn. Roslyn, for those of us who know nothing about you, who is Roslyn today on July the 4th, 2025?
Actually, it's an auspicious day because on the 4th of July 2015 was I retired from my full-time profession. So 10 years today. I thought 4th of July was a very appropriate day on which to put my pen down.
Amazing. You put your pen down and now you're going to use your voice to tell us about that, which is so cool.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, so what is Roslyn up to on the 4th of July 2025?
Today I have been online with a session from about gosh, I don't know what it was about selling from the stage, wasn't it? And how to close after you've done a speaking gig. So it's part of the public and professional speaking that I'm learning about. It's been part of my journey to transform, I guess, from somebody who was stuck for many, many years into somebody who's now moving forward and quite a different person, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and I love that, and I love that, and I would love to just touch on the fact. Do you want to tell our listeners how old you are? And I'm going to talk about why that's important.
I will be 80 in December this year.
Amazing, amazing. And why I want to touch on this because at 80 years old, Roslyn is still out there learning. And for those of you that are listening, going, "Oh, I'm too old to learn," Roslyn
Yeah.
is a clear example of like, "Hey, it's not too late to learn ever." So this is why it's really, really inspiring. But Roslyn, this is where you are today. And if we reverse back and talk about, your early life, one of the things that really stood out for me in your story that you shared was your life changed quite dramatically in an instant. When you came home one day. Should we go back and start the story there, I guess?
Yes. Yes, this is back on the 8th of January, 1989, a date never to be forgotten. I came back from Sydney, and in the middle of the night, around 12:30 at night, I found my husband dead. To be quite honest, he'd been electrocuted. It was an electrical accident, and he'd been thrown off a ladder. And of course, the electrocution, of course, gave him an instant cardiac arrest. So, um, and he'd been dead for about 7 or 8 hours, so it wasn't pretty. Certainly not something you want anybody to see, but there you have it. It was he was working on a house that we had built, a project home that we were going to use to leapfrog and build our forever home, which is where I'm living now. I built the house after he passed away, but it's a much smaller version than we had planned. But it was we were in the middle of a whole lot of financial and legal restructure. My husband had just bought into an accounting practice. He'd been working there with his best mate. And so we had all those legal issues to resolve. We had the place that we'd sold was put on the market, and we actually exchanged the contracts the morning that he passed away. So um, it was, and because his death was an accident, we had to have an autopsy and an inquest. And oh God, the first inquest fell over, and for the technicality because somebody didn't have representation and all that sort of stuff. So it was a pretty terrible time. You spoke just before, Prajesh, about small wins. At that time, my small win was 1 hour. I can remember every day I'd get up and think if I can get through the next hour, I'll survive. If I can get through the next hour, I'll survive. And that's honestly how I did survive, just 1 hour at a time until I felt I could just move forward a little bit further, a week at a time, and that sort of thing. So I took it very easily. We had three young children who were 10, 12, and 13, and I can honestly say without them, I I don't know what I would have done. They gave me a reason to get up every day, and they gave me things to do so that I could get through the day, which was very interesting. It was a really, really tough time for them, very hard for them. The oldest girl was 14, and the 13, actually, she was about to turn 14. And the other one was starting high school. How hard was that for her, leaving her other, primary school friends, making new friends, new high school, no father. It was really hard for her. And the youngest one was 10. She didn't quite understand because I can remember one night we were sitting at dinner and she said to me, "What did you do with Dad?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, where is he? What happened to him? Where did you put him?" And I thought, well, I'm not at the age of 10, I'm not about to try and explain cremation. So I just sort of said, well, he had an accident, as you know, and his heart stopped, and we had to bury him in the ground. So he's actually on a rock. So I'm not sure at what stage she realized that he wasn't sitting under the rock. But anyway. Mm.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I think why it's important to share that because a lot of people see where people are at this point in time, July the 4th, as we spoke about, but our stories start well, many, many, many years ago. And I guess, as you spoke about, your life changed quite dramatically. And I guess what was Rosalind doing the day before this happened? And what trigger was there a trigger of a change in how Rosalind's life looked after in the way you were looking at the world?
As I said, well, we'd bought into, pardon me, the partnership, and Kevin was just doing the last minute touch-ups, paintings and things on the eaves. Actually, that's what happened, and turned out that the roof was alive with electricity, which we didn't find out until it was too late. But before that, the girls and I had been on a holiday up to Anna Bay. We'd taken the tent, and we had a lovely few days up there in the surf and the sun and doing things that you do. And when we came back, that afternoon was the last time that the girls saw him. So we'd driven home, and his sister lived in Sydney. She'd invited the girls down for a few days in the school holidays, which was something which she always did, and the girls had a lovely time. Got spoilt to death, which is what aunties do, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so and so I delivered we, when we got home, I went down to the site where Kevin was and at the other house. And the girls said goodbye when we'll see you next week, sort of thing. So we came home and got organised and went to Sydney. And I dropped the girls off. And by about 9:30, I was ready to come back home. And I tried to ring a few times, rang a few places. And Rajesh, this is before the time of mobile phones.
Yeah.
There was no, this is 38 years ago, or something now, 36 years. And I tried a couple of friends and I thought, oh no, that he wasn't there. So I thought I was too late to start ringing people. I'll just drive home. So just as Murphy's Law, the brakes on my car caused me a problem as I was
Oh,
heading to
wow.
the freeway. Yeah. And at that stage, I was too frightened to stop on the freeway because there was no mobile phones to ring anybody.
Yes.
So I just drove home in second gear very, very slowly, and it took me forever. And I got home about midnight, and then I realised he wasn't at home. I didn't. The car, we have two vehicles, and the other car wasn't there. So I thought, oh, when I walked up and down the street and walk up, and I was like a maniac at this stage. I couldn't find him anywhere. I thought, where is he? What's going on? Went up and down, and my sister lived in the country, and she was visiting mum and dad, who also lived around the corner in Saratoga. And so I rang her and I said, I'm sorry to ring you at this hour of the night or morning. And I said, but I need to get you to drive me down to the house, or can I come get the car? And she said, no, I'll come down with you. So, and I had briefly said, Kevin's not home, and the only place he would be at the house. So we went down there, and as soon as I drove into the street and saw the car in the driveway, I thought, oh, something's happened. So we raced into the house, looked in all the bedrooms, nobody there. He wasn't there at all anywhere. So then came back out of the house and started to look around, and there he was beside the fence. And the ladder that he had been on had fallen over. And I thought, oh, he must have just fallen off the ladder. Anyway, of course, he had arms and legs in all sorts of
Yes.
unnatural positions. And gosh, I can remember I was a bit like a caged animal. I laid all over the top of him. He was so cold because he'd been dead for so long, and I laid over the top of him to try and warm him up, and he wouldn't answer, and it was terrible. Anyway, we ended up. The next door neighbours heard all the commotion, and they rang triple O, and so we had SES and the ambulance and police and detectives and everybody there. And the poor, you know what? The poor constable who was talking to me after at the end of all of this, uh, it was the first time he'd been to an accident like this, and the first time he'd experienced a death
Oh, wow.
on site. So this, I mean, he was wonderful. He was absolutely wonderful, lovely and warm chap, and really, really, really knew his stuff. He did his job so well. But I didn't find out until afterwards that he was a novice at that. But anyhow, we eventually, and I became absolutely paranoid, and I didn't want to lose his body. I didn't, and I wanted to go in the ambulance with him, and of course, they wouldn't let me. They were taking him to the mortuary. So, and I said, I want to go, I'll follow. And they said, no, no, you have to go home and get some rest or whatever you want to do. Anyway, so, and all I wanted to do then was just go home to the safety of my house, my own house. My sister wanted me to go back to her mum and dad's, and I said, no, 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 I want to go home. I wanted to, be where he had been present. Anyhow, one of the other things that the next morning, um, fairly early in the morning, a detective came and no, it was the next day, I think, the next day, And he suggested to me that I shouldn't leave town because I was the last person to see Kevin alive. And I thought, oh, that usually just happens in the movies. Did he actually say that to me that I? And I said, oh, I'm not going anywhere. Why would I go anywhere? I've just lost my husband. And he didn't get my point of view at all. And again, he was just doing his job. But it's just interesting how you react in those times. And I had to ring his best mate, the boss, the fellow that he'd just brought into the partnership with, and tell him that his best mate was dead. I had to ring his brother, who also lived up here, and tell him. His mum lived in Sydney, and his sister lived in Sydney as well. So that was probably two of the most difficult phone calls I've ever made, I think. Then we went to Sydney, and I went down to, Margaret came with me, my sister came with me to go and pick the girls up. And by the time I got down there, Kevin's sister knew what had happened. And of course, she was distressed. And by the time I got there, the kids were sort of wondering what's going on. Something's happened. And I said, Dad's had an accident. And they said, oh, is he okay? And I said, well, no, he's not. And they said, can we fix him? I said, no, I don't think we can. It's been an electrical accident and he's not alive anymore. And I had no idea how to tell them. I, I don't know. What does a
Yeah,
parent, when do you learn that in the parent school? You don't.
yeah,
So anyway, we came home from there. And on the way home, I called in at my doctor's surgery and just said, this is what's happened and what have you. And he gave me a prescription to calm me down. God knows what it was. I don't even know what it was now. I can't remember. Anyway, I went home and had a couple of, because I'd been awake for more than 24 hours at this point,
yeah.
and I had a couple of hours sleep and then woke up and just faced the nightmare all over again. So, and it just went on from there, and my life wasn't the same from that time that I found him, and never been the same since. Never will be. So, and my daughters they're just amazing. They've grown into magnificent women. They've made good choices in their lives. And because I always said to them, doesn't matter how angry or frustrated or dejected you feel, don't use that as an excuse to behave badly. And maybe I was too tough on them, I don't know. I've read a fair bit since about how to, how to, you know, work with or teach your children or, whatever after something like this. And I just gave them the answers as honestly as I could. And that's about the best you can do, I think, and just be there. We had a photograph, and it's up on the wall outside now, of Kevin, and we called it the boohoo photo. And uh, whenever anyone was having a boohoo day, they took the photo with them, and I always knew who was distressed. I mean, anyway, but I always knew the location of the photo. It was always, and I used it myself. I had my own boohoo days, which was to be expected, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, but it was good. They've all gone and been to university and done really, really good things, and they've travelled a lot, all of them. They have wonderful lives. They're magnificent people. I'm very proud of them.
amazing, amazing.
Gathered? Hmm.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, no. Again, it's such the story is so beautiful there because I use the word beautiful because it articulates where you've come from and where you're at the moment, and the fact that yes, you had the boohoo days, and as you said, your life changed dramatically. But what I have really enjoyed learning about you is that you haven't let that define you in a way that is deliberating. It's actually, from what I'm understanding, it's grown you and allowed you to take on the world in a whole different way. And you speak about being proud of your daughters going to university. But one thing that I'm now going to shift is about you. You also use the courage to to an MBA. And what is that like for you? Was that ever in the horizons, or was it, hey, this is my world has changed, an MBA, here I come?
That's right. It's all about, and everything we do requires courage, and that's what I talk
Yes.
about in my keynote as well. I sort of had this imaginary bucket of courage, and I dip into the bucket again today. I can't do this, So, and that's what I did time and time again. And everything you do, and it's all about and resilience, But if you have a look at a piece of elastic, now elastic is described as being resilient, but it's flippy floppy, nothing happens to it unless you do something to that elastic and make it work. And that's where the courage comes in. If you take the courage, move the elastic, you'll find the resilience. And it's just um, you just have to do it. There's no easy way to do it. You just have to be courageous in your life. It takes courage to get married, to have children, buy a house, everything that you do, change the job, take up paddleboarding, whatever you do, you've got to be courageous. You've got to have a go. And so that's what life's all about. Mm.
It sure is, and I love that because the world that I work in, I talk about crossroads. That every single day we come through crossroads in our life. Every single day, you when the alarm goes off, that's your first crossroad. Do I stay in bed or do I wake up? What do I do? Right, that's what we do. But I love the element of courage that you have to add because we all know we all know in our minds what we'd like to do, but
Mm.
why don't we do it? And as you said, the first step is courage, and
Mm.
that courage might be asking for help.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Well, it is. Yeah. Somebody said to me the other day, if you found somebody in your position, what would you do? Because we call it, we were talking about casseroles and condolences, which is what people offer. And they'd say, oh, just let me know if you need anything. But that immediately places the onus back on the
yeah,
grieving person. And I mean, grief is something nobody talks about grief. We don't. And that's such a shame because everybody deals with grief in such a different way.
yeah,
So I said to this person, I would ask the person, the bereft person, what they need. Do you need me to pick up the children? Do you need bread? Do you need me to take your car and get petrol in it? All the practicalities of life that you have to get on, that you have to get on with. And you've got to become mother to parents. The same with the widower. He has to become somebody who does all the stuff around the house, or unless he gets somebody to do it for him, which most men seem to do. And in fact, my husband had me insured for enough money to, if anything happened to me, he would have enough money to employ a housekeeper and things. And yet he was 3 weeks away from taking out $250,000 insurance because of all the changeover with the build, the business and everything else. So he just died 3 weeks too early. I was very cross with him for that for a long time, I can tell you. I became a crematorium junkie. I used to go out every day, and you got no idea the things I told him. I yelled at him, I screamed at him, and I told him I loved him and all the rest of it. It's interesting. Mm.
that's amazing what happens in emotion, right? If you told somebody that you'd do that, you would be like, what are you talking about? Until it happens, because we don't know what we don't know.
No, that's all right. No, you
Yeah,
don't. You know
yeah,
yeah, and you don't know how you're going to react until that actually happens, you
yeah,
know.
totally.
And yeah, and for me, it was just as I said, 1 hour at a time, just absolutely 1 hour at a time, and that's all I could get to, all I could do
Yeah,
every day. Mm. Yep, because I still had to get the car serviced. I still had to make sure the mortgage was paid and all that, and I couldn't do that for ages because our funds were frozen. He died in the January, and funds were frozen until August. I didn't get any because the need for an inquest. Autopsy took a week, and then you have to get the inquest. Well, there's 6 weeks after the autopsy, and it went on and on and on and on. And so we lived on thin air pretty much for quite a while. It was pretty tricky. And I'd been working every second weekend at the local health service, and I had to go back to work just to put food on the table, and which was interesting in itself, trying to get back into a hospital area where,
Yeah.
so, mm,
Yeah. And again, it's like you said, an event happens, but
mm.
life still carries on. Life doesn't stop. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And and the other in the running conga with that is the love.
Yes.
Where do you put the love? It doesn't stop just because
Yes.
he's not there anymore. And
Yeah.
where do you put that, And the grief is often described as love with nowhere to go. And it doesn't.
Yeah. That is
And
so
it
true.
doesn't. Yeah, yeah, and it doesn't dissipate straight away either. I've done a lot of research into the types of grief. I mean, we all know about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's research in the 5 stages of grief, and I can tell you I went through all of those, but the grief's now been categorized into things like anticipatory grief, ambiguous grief, complicated, traumatic, all of those sorts of things. And that's been quite helpful to me to understand why I was so stuck for so long,
Yeah.
because I was stuck in complicated, traumatic grief, really. Yeah.
And you know what's interesting there, Roslyn, is I had a conversation with one of my clients a few weeks ago, and they work in a similar space to you. And I said to them, "What does everyone experience in life, whether we like it or not?" And I said, "Everyone experiences grief. Everyone,
Mm,
everyone.
mm,
Sometimes it might be for something minor, something major, but we all go through the emotion of grief. And as you said before, there's so many different kinds of grief, but we
mm,
don't speak about it. We just wrap it under hey, everyone, you're gonna be fine. Time will heal all wounds." And
mm,
maybe it will, but we need to have that conversation. So I'm really glad that you're talking about this, but in a way that is the bucket of courage way, which is really beautiful.
mm.
And as we sh sorry,
If I just, one of the other things that I found was quite difficult is people don't know what to say to you.
yes,
And so they walk around the other side of the supermarket aisle so they can avoid you. And that feels very personal, but it's not. It's just that they don't know what to say. So very quickly, you become adept at dealing with other people's inadequacies. How do they, oh, I know, they just, look, I'm not dead yet. So, or that I used to use that when I had cancer things, but, oh, I'm still alive, he's dead, but I'm not,
yeah,
and that sort of stuff. But it's really interesting. Really,
yeah,
it's a whole. And then you get the thing where the guys come around and do all the odd jobs and things. All his mates would come around do the odd jobs and things around the house and things. And it doesn't take long before the women start to resent that. And I had no idea that all of that was happening. I just had I had no idea that that was how people behaved, And I stopped being invited to things, and you know, and the first time I had some counselling about it, the counsellor said, "Well, if you were fat and ugly, you wouldn't have to worry." I thought, "Well, that's really." Anyway, but it's yeah. Sorry, I've got a bit of hay fever today.
no, that's all right. That's all right. Humans are fascinating, eh? So fascinating in what we do and what we don't do, and also the perceptions and the stories people tell themselves about, what's a good intention becomes a whole different story in someone else's mind.
Mm. It's interesting also, Prajesh, that grief is not only about death. Grief
Yes.
can be um, separation, a divorce.
Yeah.
It's about loss as well. And
Yes.
the biggest, it's like, for me, it was absolutely such gut-wrenching sadness that you couldn't do anything about. And
Yeah.
it's a massive, massive loss from everything you used to have. You lose your future. You never lose what you've had because you've always had that.
Yes.
But you lose your future because it's never going to be the same. And he's not there to share it with you. And the children lose their father. It's just that it's just such a massive loss. And I think as I say, it doesn't only relate to grief. It's all the other things that they lost in their lives. They
Totally.
lost the financial freedom that we would have had.
Yeah.
They lost friends because friends didn't know how to treat them and that sort of stuff, so as well, And it's people that lose jobs. If people
Yeah.
be made redundant, that's a terrible sense of loss as
Yeah.
well. So yeah. Mm,
Yeah. And it's really great how you put that there. People think about grief in terms of death, but as you said, grief can be anything. The f- if you know if you, the fact that your car breaks down, even that could send you grief. Oh no, I can't get to work. I can't pick up my child. I can't.
Mm.
Those are simple things. We can't invalidate those feelings because they grief, as you said, comes is just loss. Whatever loss is,
Yeah.
we'll go through that as we said before.
One of
And
the
I'm gonna.
one, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
There's one of the interesting types of grief. Well, they're all interesting in their own rights, but the ambiguous grief is sort of uh, when perhaps I think it's often described as somebody who has, say, Alzheimer's, and they don't know who you are anymore. And you start grieving, for somebody, or you're still looking at that person, but they don't know who you are. There's anticipatory grief with people who have, say, a child with uh, say brain cancer or something, and or an inoperable anything, and that child won't survive. So you start grieving from the point of diagnosis, or from that
Yes.
time. It's like and a community grief, where for when remember when you had all the cyclones and things in Auckland. I remember because my daughter was there, and the roof blew off the shopping centre at Glendale and things, and massive community things where everybody feels the same, everybody has the same
Yeah.
loss. They lose houses, they lose cars, they lose, access to services and that sort of thing. So there's so many different types of grief now. I mean, they're
Yeah.
always there, but they were never defined that way. So,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. And I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch the focus because we've got the grief, and I'm going to talk about the same side of the coin, but the opposite emotion is, which is where you're already speaking to, is courage.
mm.
Courage. And I'd love for you to tell us about how you came up with the bucket of courage and your concept around that as something that you'd like to go and take to the world.
Well, my heart was breaking basically, and I just, and of course, the etymology of courage is kua. It comes from kua, which is in your heart. And I thought, well, you know, what can I do with my heart that's breaking? I need something to fix it. And I don't know, I just came up with the idea of the bucket, and filled it up with courage, and I'd use it every day. I don't, it just sort of something I invented, I guess.
And
Mm.
and you invented it, and now it's something you want to. Why do you think this is important for the world to hear about?
Um, because you need it, basically. You need it with everything you do. And if you have it, always have your bucket of courage there. You will be able to draw on it when you need it, and identifying when you need it is going to be the issue, I guess. You think, oh, I can't do this today, and your bucket's there. Well, I'll just dip into my bucket, and um, I'll do what I have to do. Whether you like to do it or not, you have to. There are things, as we all know, there are things that you have to do, um, and it's just very handy to have your bucket close by you wherever you are.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a real. Well, you could have a real bucket if you wanted to, just to remind you. But it's something that, as you said before, we use it all the time.
Mm.
And um, picking on some courageous themes in your life as well. We spoke about the MBA.
Yep.
As you said before, you remarried.
Yep.
But also you're a musician as well. Let's talk about that part of your world because that requires courage to be a musician. We don't think of that, but it is a courageous thing. Music is what? How does that come into your world?
It's a funny story about all that. I actually, I went to, I grew up in the bush, in the country, and we didn't have a high school in those days, and I'd been trying to learn the piano from the time that I could stand and play the piano here
Oh,
when and I had piano lessons, and the nuns at the convent where I was learning would say, um, Roslyn would be good if she could have some more lessons somewhere else in Sydney. So, cut a long story short, I was lucky enough to be able to go to the Conservatorium of Music, and they have a high school there. So I did my high school in at the conservatorium, which was absolutely wonderful. So I've got a classical background, but I got into, and you can see the record on the back of the wall there. That's from one of my shows where I was a musical director from Shout, the story of Johnny O'Keefe. And I got involved in musical theatre on the coast here by accident. Oh, not by accident. It was quite funny. There's a local businessman here who um, rang my home, and I wasn't home. And Kevin said, "I'll get her to ring you back." And I had my own studio teaching here, and I was teaching at the conservatorium here and at the local grammar school. And I used to send kids for Eisteddfods and all that sort of stuff. So most people on the coast knew me and my music teaching. And so I said to my husband, "Oh, I'm not going to ring him. I don't want to buy a car. Don't do that. Don't." And anyway, the gentleman rang again, and I did the same thing. And then my husband said to me, "You're being very rude. You really should ring him back." So I rang him back, and what had happened, they needed a musical director for a show, a production of Half a Sixpence, which they were putting on in 5 weeks.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
yeah, oh wow. I had no idea what I was getting into, no idea. And some of the songs they couldn't sing in the right keys and all that sort of stuff. There was no orchestra prepared. And in those days, you didn't have backing tracks or anything like that. We had, 15, 18-piece orchestra that we did. Anyway, that was my introduction. I did it, and we had a good show. It was really good. And that was a baptism of fire. And
Yeah.
I haven't left. And that was 1984, I think. So 41 years ago, yeah, more than half my life I spent there. I had a couple of, well, 18 months or 20 months off after Kevin died because I couldn't, I just, I kept crying. I couldn't play my own piano. I've got three pianos here. I couldn't play. I just kept crying while ever I tried music. Anyway, I went in. I got the bucket of courage going, and I went in one evening. They were having a rehearsal, and I burst into tears. And they just said, "Come on, we're just having a rehearsal. Come and listen." And that was it. It was just, it's one of those things where a community, the value of a community is really not understood, because that was so healing for me. It was really um, a place. I went on to do about 15 or 16 shows, 15 shows as a musical director, and I've done a couple of things, two or three things on stage, and played in heaps of orchestras, more than I'm my age. And it's just been it's the most amazing place. We help all sorts of people who feel they don't belong. Um, they come in and enjoy the camaraderie, and it's just amazing. Interacting with people with the same like minds and same interests, and that, as long as they leave their ego at the door, which most of them don't. So, mm.
Oh, wow. It sounds like there was a sliding door moment when that happened, and it's just changed the way your life has been with, that one moment, 5 weeks, and here you are. It's really beautiful. And talking about beautiful, Roslyn,
Oh
you've
well,
also
thank
you've also you've also been the
you.
volunteer of the year, this doesn't come lightly because people recognize the work that you do. And what is it like for you? Because we don't, I mean, I don't know about you, but you don't go into the world to try and get recognition when you're giving from the heart. When you were announced or told that you were the CEO Volunteer of the Year, how did that make you feel?
Oh, it was very humbling, actually. I got all thingy when I was being nominated, and I thought this. I just didn't think that I would ever be in that position. And this was with the Cancer Council. I'd been volunteering with them for 10 years, and we my role with them was an advocate who goes to bat for people who in the community who need assistance with cancer. And whether it's and when you get, like, I've had breast cancer twice, and when you have it impacts everybody, not just the patient. And that's often, in the old days anyway, it was less understood than it is now. I mean, people like Glenn McGrath with the McGrath nurses have done a wonderful thing because um, he's now branching out into every kind of cancer, not just breast cancer. But
Yeah.
in the old days, it was a death sentence, really. But now, 92% of breast cancer patients survive more than 5 years. Well, I've been surviving for 29 years now, and I'm going to continue to do that. But it's just, I don't know, I was really happy to give back to the Cancer Council because I had such a good experience and such a good result, basically. I wouldn't say the experience was good, never was.
Yeah.
But I mean, nothing really particularly nice about having chemo and radiation, but
Yeah.
it's certainly, it's a good. And my mantra with them is always make sure you have your, and because I'm a theatrical person, I call it a screen test, your free screening. So make sure you have your screen test and be diligent about looking after yourself. That's the way that that works. But I'm very, very privileged actually to um, and I it just felt so humbling. Just wouldn't have thought that that would ever happen to me. Because you don't do those things for, as you say, for recognition. And I almost felt selfish about it in a way because I get so much satisfaction from it. And
Yeah.
so it's giving me a whole lot of stuff just because I'm doing that for somebody else.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, it's good.
It's
It's a
it's
good
it's
thought.
it's the old adage, right? In giving that you receive, and in giving without an intention, you receive without an expectation. And this is a real life story of that's happening to you, where you were doing stuff just because you, as you said before, you had a fantastic relationship with them, and the
Mm.
end result is, you're here today and doing this amazing, as we say in Te Reo, amazing mahi and it's beautiful, beautifulness. But at the age of 80 right now, and I use that in the most beautiful way because you have such an amazing spark to you. You keep going. Where does the drive come from for you to go, hey, there's still more for me to learn. I want to get out there and do things. Um, what's your drive? What's your why, I guess?
What's my why? My why is I've been a very lucky person. I've had, I mean, my parents went to bat for me so I could come and learn music down here. It's just amazing, really. A lot of parents wouldn't have been able to do that, would not have had the opportunity or made the resources available to do that. They changed their lives to do that. Um, and I was lucky. I went, traveled overseas, and that's where I met my husband, my first husband, and three beautiful children. Almost lost a couple of them in utero, but they're beautiful children. They've also all done well. And my mum and dad, I looked after them for a while after they moved to the coast, and uh, they I'm just thinking they came to live with me for a little while because they had dementia and dad had dementia and mum got really sick trying to look after him and things. And my daughter, my oldest girl, was doing year 10 and I was making a dress for her year 10 formal. And I thought, I've got to do this when there's nobody around. So I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I got all the big dining room table with all the fabric all lined out, all beautiful, ready to start cutting and all the rest. Next minute, Dad comes paddling out. What are you doing, girl? I said, oh, I'm just making Shona's dress. Oh, can I help you? I said, well, how about you make a cup of coffee? Anyway, so that he made a cup of tea actually, and I thought that'll keep him busy for 45, 50 minutes while I can get this cut out. Anyway, he walked over after he'd made the cup of tea and he put it right down the middle of the fabric. Oh, golly. Anyway, I had enough to cut another panel, which was really good. But no, they both passed away 14 months after Kevin, actually, and they died 5 weeks apart, which was
Oh,
very
wow.
difficult.
Yeah.
Mm. So, and then at the end of that year, I had a girlfriend who committed suicide, and my sister's partner passed away as well. So I had five significant deaths in sort of 18 months, and I mean, to say I was on first name terms with the funeral home, I rang and they'd say, oh, now who is it this time, sort of thing. So, but they were wonderful. It was good. So, I'm lucky that I was been able to, you know, fight my way through, get through all of that. And I was lucky that I was able to do an MBA because in those days I finished that while I was having my chemo. And in those days, they didn't take very kindly to people working at home. It was very difficult. And anyway, I convinced them that I could still be productive, even if it was, 9 o'clock at night or whatever, or whenever I wasn't feeling unwell from the chemo. So, and I achieved that, which was really good. So, and then lucky to be married to such a lovely man now. We've been married for 28 years. I was 8 years on my own. And he's a lovely man, and he didn't have any children of his own, and my girls love him to pieces, which is really good. And he's now a poppy. He didn't have any children of his own, and he's a lovely poppy to the kids. So it's really, really, really nice. And that's pretty special for me to be able to,
Yeah.
you know, that's I think it's lovely. And it's yeah, very lucky. Mm.
Yeah. It's, your the why comes across so clearly. And what I love about it, Rosalind, is there are so many incidents in your life where you could have just given up or just change the story, change the narrative. And I'm sure, you know, this in this podcast, we don't go into the emotions that you would have gone through. And there would have been times when you were, as you said before, like, oh no. But by just break it up into an hour by hour and where
Mm.
you are today and that why which comes through so strongly. And one thing that I've noticed in the whole conversation we've had is the pride that you have for your family. It just comes through so clearly, which is really beautiful. So when you speak about that why, it's really beautiful for me to see and for our listeners to hear as well. And if you're listening, going, "Hey, you know, life sucks and life does suck. Life is a roller coaster, and it's ups and downs." But hey, maybe you could find your own boohoo picture, your boohoo quote, your boohoo, and just embrace that for a while and go, "Hey, this is okay."
Mm. It is. I mean, I just think I'm just such a lucky person. I mean, I was awarded an Order of Australia for all the stuff that I've done in the community, and yeah, that's just pretty special, really. And that in itself was a really interesting experience. You go down to Government House and feel pretty special and all the rest of it. And then you get all the people who say, "Oh, well, if she got one, they're not worth much." All the knockers and things. And you go, life's really very interesting. And I think if you, I did a gig for the Cancer Council the other day. I do a lot of, for their speaking for Australia's biggest morning teas. Do you have
Yes.
morning teas like the Cancer Council in New Zealand? I don't know.
I'm sure the other eye. Yeah.
I think you do,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And they go and raise funds and all that sort of stuff. And as I'm a guest speaker for them, and it was interesting because this one that I did the other day, the girl said to me, I was been so miserable. She said, "There's so much rubbish and stuff going on in the world, and everything's negative, and it's really awful." And she said, organizing this and doing this morning tea has showed her how much good and warmth and love there is in the world because so many people, pardon me, donate their time and their and whatever they give so that people to raise money for Cancer Council. So I just thought that's such a lovely story, isn't it? With everything that's being so negative at the moment, and you get somebody who gets a real aha moment about how lovely people are down, deep down. So it's quite good, I think. Mm.
Yeah. And one of the things I've learned over time is every single one of us is inherently good. We don't wake up in the morning to make someone have a bad day. We don't. None of us do that there. But life sometimes throws these situations where it ends up happening. But when you go to bed and wake up in the morning, you don't go, "I'm gonna make Roslyn's life terrible today." No one does that there. So it's really beautiful. People acknowledge that there, as you said, in the world where if we look at the noise in the media, we think the world is crumbling in certain places, but
Yeah.
at the individual level
Mm.
in your own sphere, it's very different. And
Yeah.
it's again, it's a big acknowledgement to you, Rosalind, that you were awarded the Order of Australia. You've got the CEO Volunteer, you've got all these really amazing accolades. But if we take all that away, To me, I just see someone that is that is here because they want to share with the world that hey, courage comes in all forms, and we can all put our hands into the bucket and use that courage.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And make it a pretty large bucket because there's times when you'll need a lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, beautiful, Roslyn. Roslyn, we've been speaking for almost an hour, and time has just flown
Gosh.
by so quick, which is amazing. Um, and there's so much in your life that we haven't touched, but I think what you've shared today is beautiful. But before I end the the episode today, we have a tradition in our podcast, which is called our podcast is called Baskets of Knowledge, and we invite our guests to share a piece of knowledge to put into our basket. You've shared so much today, but is there any piece of knowledge you'd like myself or our guests to put into our basket in any part of your life?
Just use your courage. Just give, design your own bucket. Can be large, small, square, whatever you want, however you feel. Design yourself a bucket, fill it up with courage, and use it every day, every time you need it, because it's always there, and courage comes from the heart.
I love that. So, yep, go and design your bucket, whatever shape, whatever size, and use it. And I guess, Rosalind, it's limitless, right? Courage doesn't stop.
No,
The
no,
bucket, the bucket is always
bottomless.
full. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
bottomless. Yep.
Bottomless pit, exactly. No, beautiful, Rosalind. Rosalind, any last things before I say goodbye to you this afternoon? Any last words for our listeners of myself?
No, thank you for having me as a guest. It's an honor to actually be able here to speak with you today. I think if anybody hears this and gets something out of it, then we've achieved a lot today. I think that's very good, and I just keep doing what you're doing because I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
Amazing, Rosalind. And if people want to get hold of you, how could they do that? They've heard the story and they go,
Oh,
"Hey, Rosalind, you're amazing. How can we get hold of you?"
you can find me at Roslyn English Speaker at gmail.com, and that will find me for the moment. I'm just midstream with setting up my website and things. So, but Roslyn English Speaker at gmail.com.
Awesome. So if you're out there and you go, "Hey, I need someone inspirational at one of my talks," there we go, right there, Rosalind English Speaker at gmail.com. Rosalind, it's been a real pleasure and a privilege having you on today. And to me, it's quite a crazy full circle moment for me, listening to 4th of July 10 years ago, 4th of July. We're sharing a little tip of your story today, which is really beautiful. I can't wait to see how I'm going to grow by just being in your proximity, even though it's online. And today, just hearing your story reminds me of my own fact that hey, courage is available. I've just got to dip into it in those moments when I think I don't have any courage.
It's free.
It's free. It's free. You don't have to pay anybody for that. Yeah. Thank you, Roslyn, so much. For our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening in. Hopefully, you have picked up something today. If you haven't picked up something, go back and listen again because I'm sure you weren't listening. This has been a really inspirational, aspirational, and really positive conversation. Until next time, everybody, don't forget to find a reason to smile. Don't forget to find your bucket of courage. And most important of all, don't forget to put something into your basket of knowledge. Until next time, ka kite. Bye, everybody. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.